because knowing helped me see any chaos coming. And chaos was definitely coming. Bailey and Bryce had moved fast. Way too fast. They were apparently living together now. After less than 2 months of dating, he'd moved into the townhouse. My old townhouse. Because his lease had fallen through and he needed somewhere to stay. Translation. He'd been evicted. And Bailey was too desperate to ask questions. Margot said the whole family was worried. Hank and Susan had tried to talk to Bailey about it. But she'd accused them of being unsupportive, said they'd never accepted Bryce, said they liked me too much and couldn't see what was right in front of them. The irony was so thick you could choke on it. The money situation was getting worse, too. Bryce had talked Bailey into some kind of investment thing. Cryptocurrency or Forex or one of those other things. She'd put in a chunk of her savings. The returns that were supposed to show up had not shown up. Shocking absolutely no one except her. Meanwhile, I was doing something I hadn't done in years. Saving money, not covering someone else's mistakes, or funding someone else's lifestyle. Just putting money aside like a normal, functioning adult. I bought a newer truck. Used but good, low miles, good engine. Paid cash. The 5th attempt at contact came in week 10. She showed up at the shop. I was under a D8 cat. Draining transmission fluid. When I heard Hank's voice take on that tone he used when something was off, rolled out from under the machine, and saw her standing just inside the bay door. She looked rough. Hank was already walking toward her. Looking like he was torn between being her dad and being professional, I stayed where I was, oil-stained and grease-marked. Not interested at all in whatever she'd come to say. "You can't be back here, Bailey," Hank said. "This is a work site. I just need 5 minutes," she said, looking past him at me. "Cole, please, just 5 minutes." I didn't move. "Bryce left," she said, her voice cracking. "He took everything, money from the account. The TV, my grandmother's jewelry, he's gone. I called the cops. But they said it's a civil matter because we were living together." Hank turned to look at me. Checking my reaction, I kept my face blank. "That sucks. But I don't know what you want me to do about it." "I screwed up," she said. "Coming here asking for help. I know it's a lot. But I don't have anyone else. My friends won't call me back. Tara blocked me after I asked to borrow money. I've got nobody." I wiped my hands on a shop rag. Took my time with it. "You told me I was a placeholder," I said finally. "You said I was keeping the seat warm for something better. Looks like something better came along. Sucks it didn't work out." Her face just fell apart. Like the words were physically hitting her. Hank stepped forward. "Bailey, you need to go. This isn't the place for this." "Dad, please," she said. Breath. Now she left. Didn't look back. Hank came over to me after she was gone. Put a hand on my shoulder. Didn't say anything. Didn't have to. I went back to work. Transmission fluid doesn't drain itself. The full story about Bryce came out over the next few weeks. Mostly through Margot's texts. And the occasional update from Dana. She hears everything. Turns out Bryce wasn't just your average jerk. He was a professional con artist in a nice suit. The finance job was real. Barely. But it was mostly a front for what he actually did. Find women with access to money. And drain them dry. Margot did some digging. Found he'd used at least 2 different last names in the past 5 years. Plus a string of civil judgments and eviction filings in other counties. Bailey wasn't his first victim. She wasn't even his first victim this year. He'd done the same thing to at least 2 other women in the area before moving on. The cryptocurrency thing wasn't just a bad investment. It didn't exist. He'd had her send money to an account he controlled. Showed her fake screenshots of returns. Convinced her to put in more. Then vanished with everything. The really brutal part. Margot found out that Bryce had been talking about Bailey to someone from his old city. Called her an easy mark. Said she was so desperate to prove she'd upgraded from her mechanic boyfriend that she didn't ask a single question about anything, didn't verify his job, didn't check his references. Margot said Bailey was looking at losses around $8,000. plus whatever he'd taken when he left. Plus the emotional hit of realizing she'd been played by someone who never cared about her at all. Karma's got a particular kind of cruelty when it shows up. The fallout was everywhere. Bailey's credit card debt was apparently bad. The rent at the townhouse was now entirely on her. She'd already missed one payment. Her car needed repairs she couldn't afford. Her work situation hadn't gotten better. If anything, it had gotten worse. After she'd taken several unexplained days off during the whole Bryce disaster, Hank and Susan were helping where they could. But even parental patience runs out eventually. Hank told me quietly during a lunch break that they'd made it clear to Bailey that she needed to start owning her choices. No more rescues. No more excuses. Margot was less gentle about it. She'd apparently told Bailey exactly what she thought about her behavior over the past 3 years, including how she'd treated me. The conversation had not gone well. They weren't talking now. Tara and Britt had bailed, of course. Fair weather friends doing what fair weather friends do. When Bailey had clout, they were around. Now that she was struggling, they were conveniently busy. And me, I was doing fine. Better than fine, actually. I had my apartment. I had my job. I had friends who actually showed up. I had Chester, who had gotten way too comfortable in his new kingdom. I had Saturday mornings with coffee by the window, watching the world go by, feeling something I'd almost forgotten was possible. Peace, actually feeling stable, knowing exactly where I stood, and not having to wonder if things were about to fall apart. Week 14. I came home from work on a Thursday evening. Regular day. Put my keys on the hook. Fed Chester. Started thinking about dinner. Then the buzzer went off. My building had a security door at street level. You needed to be buzzed in or you needed a key. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hit the intercom. Yeah, Cole. It's me. Please let me in. Her voice was different. Desperate. I didn't respond. Just stood there looking at the intercom. I know you're there, she said. I can see your truck in the lot. Please, I just need to talk. 5 minutes. Then I'll leave. I thought about ignoring it, letting her stand there until she gave up. But I was curious. I buzzed her into the building, walked to my apartment door, and waited. Didn't open it yet. She looked like a completely different person walking up those stairs. Not the confident, polished woman who'd laughed at my proposal in front of her family. This was someone who'd been emptied out. Hair unwashed. No makeup. Wearing a sweater I recognized from years ago. Back when things were different. She looked like she'd been crying for days. She stopped at my door. I opened it 6 inches. Chain still on. Didn't step aside. Didn't invite her in. Just stood there in the gap and waited for whatever this was. She tried to look past me into the apartment, at my sparse furniture, at Chester, who'd retreated to his spot by the window, watching her with that suspicious cat look. Can I come in? She asked, barely above a whisper. No. Say what you got to say. She finally looked at me. Eyes red and puffy. I lost everything, she said. The townhouse. The car is getting repoed. I'm staying with my parents because I've got nowhere else. My job is barely hanging on. Margot thinks I'm awful. She paused. My dad can barely look at me, barely. That last part hit different. Hank had always adored Bailey. Always made excuses for her. Even when she was clearly wrong. He'd find some reason. For him to pull back like that meant something had really broken. I wondered if Margot had finally told him everything. The conversation she'd overheard. How Bailey had been planning the rejection for weeks. All of it. Bryce took everything, she continued. All my savings. Things that mattered to me. My grandmother's ring that I was going to wear at my wedding someday. And the cops can't do anything because he was smart about it. He made sure everything looked like I agreed to it. I signed stuff. I sent money on my own. I let him into my place. Hard to miss the irony there. I still didn't say anything. Just watched her. She took a shaky breath. I've been thinking a lot about the party. About what I said. About how I treated you. Not just that night. For months before that, maybe longer. I was wrong, she said. and getting the words out seemed to hurt. Not just about you, about everything. I thought I wanted excitement, adventure, someone who matched the life I thought I deserved. She let out a hollow laugh. I got exactly what I asked for. Chester meowed once, low and unimpressed. Even the cat was over it. Cole, I know I've got no right to ask this, but is there any way we could try again? She stepped toward me. Eyes desperate. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But you were stable and reliable and good. And I threw it away for someone who saw me as a mark. She reached for my hand. I moved it away. I'll do anything, she said. Move somewhere new. Whatever it takes. Her voice broke. I can't do this by myself. You always handled everything and now I'm drowning. And I don't know what to do. There it was, under all the apologies. The admissions. There it was. I let the quiet stretch until it got uncomfortable. So now that you've lost everything, I said, my voice flat, you want to fix things because I was useful. She flinched. Hearing her own words thrown back at her. I remember every word. Bailey, every single one. You meant it. All of it. No. You just showed me who you really are. I corrected. You finally said out loud what you'd been thinking for months. Maybe years. And now you want me to act like that never happened because your plan B blew up in your face. Tears were running down her face now. I'm not your safety net, I said. I'm not the backup plan you come running back to when the main plan falls apart. I'm worth more than what I can do for you. And I deserve someone who gets that from day one. Not just when they're out of options. Cole, please. You asked if there's any chance we could try again. I shook my head slowly. No, there's not. There never will be. What you said at that party killed whatever was between us. You don't get to bring it back now because your life went sideways. She sobbed more. You need to leave, I said. You need to figure your life out on your own. Learn how to be responsible for yourself. Stop looking for someone to carry you. I don't know how to do that. Then figure it out. I started closing the door. Goodbye, Bailey. She put her hand on the door, trying to stop it. Cole, please. I waited. After a few seconds, her hand dropped. Goodbye, I said again. Closed the door. Locked it. Listened to her stand there for a long moment. Then her footsteps going down the hallway. I went back inside. Made myself dinner. Sat at my small table and ate in the quiet. I'd been called delusional for thinking I was worth marrying. Turns out, I was worth a lot more than that. She thought I'd be there forever. Waiting for her to decide I was good enough. She thought wrong. Group's been having some trouble lately. I was thinking, Maria, with your network. Maybe you could help me introduce a few investors. She raised an eyebrow. I've heard it's not a small problem. The business circles are all buzzing saying Willow might not bounce back this time. My smile froze for half a second, surprised at how fast and wide the rumors were spreading. George, she suddenly dropped her smile, her tone softer, as if coaxing a child. You know I care for you. If you need money, I can help, but investing in Lou Group, that's a bottomless pit. A wave of irritation surged within me, but I held myself back from snapping. Maria, you misunderstood. I get it. She cut me off, patting my hand with a knowing look. If you figured things out, feel free to come by. But she smiled again slowly, adding, wearing the husband of Willow label doesn't help your case. I nearly fled the scene in embarrassment. The next few hours went much the same. I met with two other old friends, one in the jewelry business, the other a hidden backer in real estate. I tried to make the rounds, hoping for a chance to pull in some collaborations. The result was the same. Favors could be done, money could be offered, but investing in Lou Group? No way. Even more ironically, they outright asked when I planned to become single again. In the evening, I sat alone at an old bar in the city center. 3 empty glasses in front of me. The bartender, tactfully quiet, refilled my fourth glass of whiskey. I downed half of it, feeling like there was a fire burning in my stomach. George, drinking alone? I looked up, the voice painfully familiar. It was a person who shouldn't have appeared at this moment. Makoto Ito, with his well-maintained face. He still looked as polished as ever, over 50 hair impeccably styled, suit pristine, and a Patek Philippe watch on his wrist that cost twice as much as mine. I forced myself to greet him. President Ito. What a coincidence. He sat down next to me, shaking his head with a smile. Not a coincidence. I came specifically to find you. I was a bit dazed. Find me? I heard Lou Group has been having some trouble lately, he said, gently swirling his drink, the ice cubes clinking crisply against the glass. I'm quite interested in your predicament. His words snapped me halfway out of my stupor. You mean, invest? Makoto smiled faintly, but there was a sense of certainty in his voice. It's not just an investment. I can take over Lou's debt completely, inject capital for restructuring, and keep Willow as the CEO. Of course, the decision-making power will rest with me. I frowned. She won't agree to that. That's why I need you to persuade her. He handed me a napkin with an astronomical figure written on it. If you help me seal the deal, this money is yours. I stared at the number, my heart racing. This amount of money. It would be enough for me to live a carefree life for years, even without Willow. But I still asked the question I had been holding back. Why? Why are you so interested in Lou Group? His smile never faltered as he replied, It's just business. Lou Group has a solid foundation. It's just a strategic mistake. I understand its value. What value did he see? Something felt off, but my brain, clouded by alcohol, wasn't working right. In the end, I vaguely agreed to talk it over, then stumbled out of the bar. By the time I got home, it was already late into the night. The house was quiet, with only a sliver of light coming from the study. I pushed open the door and saw Willow sleeping at her desk. A thick stack of documents lay in front of her, her computer still on, fatigue lingering in the corners of her eyes. I wanted to wake her, but when my gaze landed on the photo at the corner of the desk, I froze. It was our wedding photo. She wore a simple wedding dress that day, smiling brighter than I'd ever seen her before. I stood beside her in a perfectly fitted suit, looking every bit the perfect husband to a Wang madam. Next to the photo was a document. I picked it up and saw it was a list of her personal assets being sold. Jewelry, real estate, even the antiques left by her mother. All marked as sold. I knew what those antiques meant to her. They were the only things her mother had left her. She never let anyone touch them. Not even when we moved. She packed them up herself. Now, she had sold them. Willow hummed softly in her sleep, and I noticed her eyelashes were wet. I stood there frozen, feeling as though something heavy had struck me in the chest. What have I done today? My mind was filled with thoughts of how to escape, which path would be safer, which sugar daddy might still be willing to take the deal, and she was holding up my accustomed lifestyle by sacrificing her most precious possessions. I gently placed the list back in its place, making sure not to wake her. Then I went to the bedroom, grabbed a blanket, and carefully draped it over her shoulders. Back in my own room, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. The number that Makoto had written down, and Willow's smile in the photo, swirled in my mind. Suddenly, I felt a wave of disgust wash over me. I opened my phone, went into WeChat, and deleted all those contacts who only appeared late at night. Then I sent a message to Makoto Ito. Sorry, President Ito. I can't help with this. As I hit send, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. I didn't know if Lou Group could survive, or if tomorrow's news would tear us apart even more. But I had finally made a choice, a decision I hadn't expected. Even for myself, I would stay. I would face this storm with Willow. Chapter 3. The moment the court seal was affixed to the mansion's gate, I truly realized that the word Bankruptcy wasn't just an abstract term in financial news. It was a heavy hammer that could land right on your head. I stood at the door, watching a few court officers rummaging through the living room, inventorying everything as though the homeowners didn't even exist. One of them, a middle-aged officer with a greasy face and a thick layer of fat, waved me aside with a scowl. "Stay back. Don't interfere with the proceedings." I swallowed my anger, my gaze falling on the Aston Martin in the garage. "Are you taking this one too?" I raised my voice, pointing at my favorite limited edition car. "This is mine. It's registered under Willow's name, so it's getting seized," he answered without looking up. "But it's mine, George." Willow's soft voice interrupted me. She pulled on my wrist, her voice barely audible in the wind. "Let them take it." I turned to look at her, but I couldn't bring myself to argue any further. She looked utterly drained, her face pale and haunting, dark circles under her eyes, lips cracked and dry. She was wearing the simplest of outfits, a white shirt and black trousers, her usual jewelry, nowhere to be seen. I knew those things had already been sold to cover debts. I wanted to say something like, "Are you okay?" But the words wouldn't come out. None of us were okay. How could I comfort her when I couldn't even comfort myself? The sports car was driven away, the roar of the engine sounding like a cruel mockery. Watching its taillights fade, I felt a sense of utter humiliation. "George," her voice broke through my thoughts. "Pack your things. We have to move out tonight." "Move where?" I asked. She hesitated before answering. "I bought a small apartment in the old district when I was in college. It's not in the company's name." I froze for a moment. She had never mentioned it before. She had a backup plan all along. After 3 years of marriage, I suddenly realized how little I actually knew about her. 2 hours later, I stood by the elevator, dragging 2 suitcases, everything of value I could take. A few clothes, some watches, personal items. The limited edition watches were well hidden. She hadn't seen them. I had no intention of telling her about them. I glanced back at the familiar mansion. The luxurious life that once seemed so real now felt like a distant dream. This moment, however, was the only thing that felt real. I knew I might never return here. She only had a small carry-on suitcase, looking lighter than mine. "Let's go." She pressed the elevator button, her tone flat, just before the doors closed. I saw the butler, old Sean, standing at the door, his eyes filled with a complex emotion. It seemed like he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. I wasn't sure if I should say goodbye. Her old district apartment was nothing like I imagined. The hallway reeked of a mix of oil fumes and mildew. My leather shoes made a soft, uncomfortable sound as they hit the yellowing carpet. There was no elevator, so we climbed 5 flights of stairs, and I nearly couldn't catch my breath by the time we reached the top. "This is it." She pulled out a key and opened a battered green iron door. When I walked inside, I was stunned. This place, it was so small. 1 bedroom and 1 living room. Probably not even 50 square meters. The living room had poor lighting. The wallpaper yellowed. A water stain in the corner. Without thinking, I blurted, "Can anyone even live here?" She paused for a moment, but didn't get angry. She simply said, "Better than sleeping on the street." I tossed my carry-on bag in the corner and collapsed onto the couch. The springs in the broken sofa dug into my back, making me wince. Irritated, I yanked off my tie and couldn't help but ask, "What are we supposed to do now?" Willow had already opened her laptop, typing rapidly, looking calm, as if nothing had happened. "I'm contacting a few investors," she said evenly. "I've got a new project." "A new project?" I interrupted, my voice rising several octaves. "The company just went bankrupt, and you're thinking of starting a new project? We're about to lose our place to live." She looked up at me, her gaze emotionless, tone steady. "Precisely because of this, we need to stand up quickly. I've already had the lawyers begin the bankruptcy procedures. But we need a source of income. I jumped up from the couch, pacing back and forth in the cramped living room, like a caged animal. A source of income? I scoffed. I don't even have a car left. Do you know what people are saying about me out there? They're just waiting for me to fail. The myth of George relying on his wife is gone. And they're probably making videos to upload to trending now. She didn't respond right away. Just when I was about to explode, she looked up at me, her gaze as cold as a blade. That's exactly why you should prove them wrong. Prove? I scoffed, feeling like I was hearing a joke. You think everyone can be like you, cold and emotionless, working without a care. You think anyone can go bankrupt and still talk about new projects. You're not human. You're a machine. She closed her laptop, closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath. I haven't lost everything, she said slowly, her voice steady. I still have my connections, my experience, my reputation. These are the real assets, not cars or houses. I couldn't take it anymore, a cold laugh escaping me. I spat out. That sounds good, doesn't it? You know what people are saying about you? That you're just a vase, living off your father's name. And now your true colors are finally showing. The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them instantly. Her face drained of color, her eyes locked onto mine, unblinking, as if I had struck her with a heavy blow. She instinctively clenched her fingers around the edge of the table, her knuckles going white, her whole body stiffened like stone. I forgot. When her father passed away, she cried for 3 days straight. She even fainted once. It was the first and only time I saw her completely break down. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. I choked, trying to apologize. She had already stood up, grabbed her coat from the back of the chair, moved swiftly with a cold, precise motion. I'm going out for some air, she said, her voice hoarse, but still trying to maintain composure. You should calm down. The door shut quietly, but it felt like a slap to my face. I grabbed the glass cup on the coffee table, raising it in anger, but stopped at the last second. It was a cheap cup, worth only $10 from the supermarket. If I broke it, I'd be the one paying for it. I slowly set the cup down, slumping back into the sofa, my hands pressing hard into my face. I didn't know how everything had turned out this way. Just a week ago, I was the son-in-law of the Liu family, the envy of everyone in my social circle, living the dream life with my limited edition sports car, custom-made suits, and limitless black cards. Now, I sat in this moldy little apartment, unsure if I could even afford to break a cup. My phone buzzed again. It was a message from the club manager. Young Master Wong, heard you're down on your luck. Wanna come have a drink? It's on me. I stared at the message, the bitter taste of frustration filling my mouth. The gloating tone was unmistakable. I angrily turned off my phone and threw it to the other side of the sofa. I knew they were all watching now, waiting to see if I would grovel and beg for their help, if I would crawl back on my knees, pleading for their charity. The sky had turned completely dark, and Willow still hadn't returned. I couldn't sit still anymore. I reopened my phone, seeing a flood of unread messages and missed calls, all asking about the bankruptcy. I swiped through the notifications in irritation, finally dialing her number. No answer. I grabbed my coat and rushed out, forgetting to even put on my shoes properly. The night air hit my face cold and crisp, carrying with it a hint of panic that I couldn't quite explain. I didn't know where she had gone, or if I'd even find her. But I couldn't stay in that moldy apartment pretending nothing had happened. The streets of the old district were narrow. The faded signs, the yellowed streetlights, the noise from the apartments above, all felt like a different world compared to the high-end neighborhood I was used to. I didn't belong here. At least I didn't think I did. As I turned a corner, I spotted a familiar silhouette through the window of a cafe. She was sitting there, still as focused as ever, surrounded by a pile of documents, with a laptop in front of her. The light from the cafe illuminated her face, tired but resolute. At that moment I hesitated to go in. Just as I was debating whether or not to approach, a shrill voice broke my thoughts. Well, if it isn't young Master Wong. I turned to see Maria. She was dressed in her usual garish style. Tight dress hugging her exaggerated curves, thick makeup, and a smile that looked like it belonged in a scripted game of Who's the Villain. She was clinging to the arm of a middle-aged man in a suit, her eyes gleaming with malicious glee. She laughed, her voice shaking as she said, "I heard your wife went bankrupt. How tragic. 1 minute you're the rich pampered son-in-law, and now you're a broke fool. How does it feel?" I clenched my teeth, my fists tightening until my knuckles turned white. "None of your business. Don't be so rude," she cooed, leaning against the man beside her. "Mr. Lin, this is George, Willow's kept boy. Now that the foundation has crumbled, I wonder who he's going to rely on for his next meal." Mr. Lin squinted, looking me up and down with clear disdain. "You look decent, but unfortunately, you're all show and no substance." The anger in me flared instantly, but I didn't move. Suddenly, it hit me. Without Willow, I was nothing in their eyes, just an outdated toy, a fallen waste. No car, no house, no Madame Lu by my side. I wasn't even considered a person. I didn't want them to look at me for another second. I muttered, "Get out of the way," under my breath, pushing past them and walking into the cafe. She looked up when she saw me, clearly taken aback. Her lips parted as if to say something, but she hesitated. "What are you doing here?" I sat down across from her, my throat tight and dry. I said simply, "I'm sorry." She was silent for a few seconds, before closing her laptop and speaking in a soft, resigned tone. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have dragged you into this life. It's not your fault." I shook my head, my voice low. "I was too immature. I ran into Maria earlier, your model girlfriend." Her tone was so indifferent. It was like she was talking about the weather. I awkwardly nodded. She mocked me, and that's when I realized, aside from you, I really have nothing. A brief flicker passed through her eyes, but she quickly masked it. "George, our situation is really bad right now. If you want to move on with your life, I understand." "Move on with my life?" I asked, confused. "Divorce." She looked at me, her gaze cool and almost cruel. "You can take whatever assets are left and start over. With your qualifications, finding a woman who will support you won't be hard." I froze. "Divorce." She actually said the word. I knew things were bad, but I never imagined it would come to this. Even during the worst of times, I had always thought that once she pulled through, we'd return to the life we once had. "I don't want a divorce," I heard myself say, my voice strangely firm. "I made a vow in the church when I married you, for better or worse." She moved her lips slightly, her voice dry. "That was 3 years ago, in a church. You didn't even write your vows yourself." I was momentarily speechless, but I didn't want to give up just like that. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. "But now, I'm serious. Willow, give me a chance to prove I'm not just a fool." She gently pulled her hand away, gathering her documents. She said flatly, "Let's go back. We've got a lot to do tomorrow." We walked out of the cafe side by side, the night breeze cooling some of the tension inside me. I was about to say something, when I suddenly noticed a black Mercedes parked across the street. The window was halfway down, and I could make out a shadowy figure watching us. But before I could make out any more details, the car silently drove off, disappearing around the corner. "What's wrong?" she asked. I stared at the direction the car had gone for a few seconds, then shook my head. "Nothing." The next morning I was woken by the doorbell. The sound was sharp and insistent, pounding in my head like a hammer. Groggily I pulled on a jacket barefoot and opened the door, only to be met by a flurry of camera flashes. "Mr. Wong, how's your relationship with Mrs. Liu after the bankruptcy?" There are rumors you're preparing for a divorce. Is that true? President Liu, what are your next steps? Two reporters stood at the door, thrusting microphones and cameras at me. Completely unconcerned with my messy hair and disheveled appearance, I froze for a second, then realized what was happening. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Willow already up, making coffee in the kitchen. She wore a simple t-shirt and jeans, her hair loosely tied back with a scrunchie. She looked nothing like the composed, cold CEO I was used to seeing in the office. In that moment, she looked like an ordinary, quiet woman. "Get out," I yelled, shoving the reporters. "This is my house, a private residence." But they weren't intimidated at all. If anything, they became more aggressive. "Mr. Wang, we hear your sports car has been seized. How do you feel about that?" "President Liu, Mr. Makoto has expressed interest in acquiring Liu Group. Will you consider it?" I froze. "Makoto." In that instant, Willow sharply lifted her head, her eyes freezing the very air around us. "Makoto Ito." Her voice wasn't loud, but it was cold enough to cut through the tension. The reporters, like sharks smelling blood, were practically ready to pounce. "Yes, Mr. Ito publicly announced this morning that he's willing to take over Liu Group entirely, with the condition that you step down from the management. Would you agree to that?" I saw her fingers tighten around the coffee cup until the knuckles turned white, her entire body rigid, yet holding firm. My mind went blank with anger, and before I realized it, I stepped in front of her, growling, "No comment." I grabbed her hand, protecting her, as we rushed out the door. She didn't struggle. Instead, her fingers tightened around mine. The reporters chased us, and we stumbled into a taxi, slamming the door shut. Only then did I finally let out a sigh of relief. "Where to?" the driver asked. Willow gave an address, then whispered to me, "Thank you." Those two words left me speechless. It was the first time she had ever said, "Thank you" to me. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "About Makoto. Don't ask." Her voice was low, but filled with determination. "Now isn't the time." I nodded wisely, falling silent. Glancing down at my phone, it was already flooded with notifications. Hashtag Liu Group bankruptcy. Hashtag couple spotted. Hashtag George protecting wife. Hashtag Willow's downfall. I clicked on the trending photo. The one snapped as we rushed out of the crowd of reporters. In the photo, I was tightly holding onto Willow, my face dark but resolute, while she looked up at me, her expression a mix of surprise and something else. I never thought I'd be trending for protecting my wife. "What are you looking at so intently?" Willow asked. I handed her the phone. "We're trending." She took a glance, her expression neutral, as she said, "At least this picture isn't bad." I smiled. It was the first time in days that I smiled with genuine warmth. In that moment, I suddenly realized, losing the cars, the house, the black cards, might not be such a bad thing. Perhaps this was my chance to rediscover myself. Not as the idle Mr. Willow, but as a man who could stand in front of her, holding her hand. When it truly mattered, the taxi drove through the streets, heading toward the city center. The sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow on our shoulders. As we sat side by side, felt like the beginning of something new. Chapter 4. Rain lashed against the window, dense and suffocating in its rhythm. I stood in the small dim kitchen, staring blankly at the pot bubbling on the stove. This was my third attempt at making porridge. The first two either burned or turned into rice soup because I added too much water. Now this one was about to boil over, and I still couldn't even hold the ladle properly. Steam rose from the pot lid, blurring my vision, while the aroma of rice spread through the shabby little kitchen. Unexpectedly, it felt a bit warm. A flash of lightning split the sky outside, flooding the kitchen with a ghastly white light. I glanced at the clock, 10:30 p.m. Willow still hadn't come back. Ever since we moved here, She'd been working late almost every night. I knew she didn't want me to see her. When she was barely holding it together, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out instinctively. A text from an unknown number popped up. "How's President Lou lately? Heard she had a mental breakdown." I didn't even bother to look twice. Before deleting it, that was the 5th one today. Ever since the Lou Corporation's bankruptcy became public, all sorts of vultures had appeared, sniffing around for blood, eager to watch us fall apart. The porridge started sticking to the pot. I scrambled to turn off the heat and nearly burned my hand on the steam. I let out a bitter laugh. 3 months ago, I was still mocking others in a 5-star presidential suite for being too slow at opening champagne, and now I couldn't even cook a pot of porridge right. Just as my thoughts began to spiral, the door lock clicked. I quickly set down the ladle and rushed to the entryway. She was back. She was drenched, like she'd been pulled from a river. Her long hair clung to her face. Her shirt stuck to her narrow shoulders. Her lips pale with a tinge of sickly blue. "What happened to you? Did you walk through the rain? Why didn't you take a cab?" I took her dripping briefcase from her and started taking off my jacket to wrap around her shoulders. She shook her head, her voice so hoarse it was barely audible. "Save the money," walked from the bus stop. The next moment, her legs gave out, and she collapsed forward. I caught her by reflex, her forehead pressed against my shoulder. The feverish heat burned right through my shirt and into my chest. "You've got a fever." Before I could say more, she tried to protest weakly. "I'm fine. I still have a project to revise. Don't move." My tone was harsher than I'd ever used before. As I forced her to sit down on the sofa, I rummaged through every drawer until I finally found a mercury thermometer in a small first aid box. She didn't resist, just obediently held it under her tongue, her eyes unfocused, her damp eyelashes sticking together, fragile against her skin. 5 minutes later, I lifted the thermometer toward the light, 39.5 degrees Celsius. I sucked in a sharp breath and swore under it. "Damn it. Are you insane? You're burning up? And still thinking about work?" Her eyes stayed closed, her voice barely a whisper. "Tomorrow, I have to meet the investors." "The hell you do?" I snapped, my voice rising louder than I'd intended. She just shook her head faintly, as if she were used to this. "No hospital. Just some medicine. I've had this before." I froze. Before. Then it hit me. We'd been married for 3 years, and I'd never once seen her sick. I had no idea how she'd endured all this before I came along. I gave in with a sigh, went to the wardrobe and pulled out one of my t-shirts and a pair of sweatpants. Kneeling in front of her, I said softly, "At least change out of those wet clothes. Can you manage on your own?" She nodded, took the clothes from me, and staggered toward the bathroom. I followed her out of worry, but before I could even take a step, there was a dull thud. "Willow!" I rushed in to find her on her knees, halfway through changing, her forehead pressed against the cold tile wall. I hurried over and pulled her up. Her body felt weightless, limp, her consciousness already fading. After that, everything became a blur. I only remember running into the rain with her wrapped in a blanket, carrying her down the stairs on my back. I tried to hail a cab for 10 whole minutes, but no one would stop. Finally, I shoved 2 crumpled 100 yuan bills at a hesitant driver before he agreed to take us through the storm to the hospital. The emergency room lights were blinding. The doctor said it was a high fever caused by a severe cold, and that she needed 4 fluids and observation. Then he added that her stomach showed signs of bleeding, probably due to long-term irregular eating. She needs at least a week of full rest. No more work, the doctor said sternly. I nodded, my eyes fixed on her face the entire time. She was asleep, her cheeks flushed crimson from the fever, her eyelashes trembled faintly, and the 4-needle in her hand looked too heavy for her thin wrist to bear. By 3 in the morning, I'd rented a folding bed to stay by her side, but I couldn't sleep at all. The hospital smell, the echo of footsteps in the corridor, the occasional groan from patience. It all made the world feel unbearably cold. I turned over to look at her peaceful face, and noticed for the first time that there was a tiny mole beneath her right eye, something makeup had always hidden before. She wasn't wearing lipstick. Her lips were cracked and dry, making her look so exhausted. I gently took her hand in mine, cold, fragile. This was the same hand that had signed multimillion-dollar contracts that had once held up the entire Lou Corporation. Now it didn't even have the strength to hold a glass of water. "What have you gone through?" I muttered hoarsely, my throat tight and eyes burning. By dawn, she woke up. Her eyes fluttered open, scanning the unfamiliar room, until they landed on my face. For a second, my heartbeat raced faster than it had the night of her fever. "George!" I immediately sat up. "You're awake. How do you feel?" I pressed the back of my hand to her forehead. "It's gone down a lot. Do you want some water?" She nodded weakly, her hands still trembling. So I cupped the bottom of the glass and carefully helped her sip. "The doctor said you can't work for at least a week," I told her gently. The moment I said it, her brows furrowed. "No, I have to meet President Jean tomorrow. I already canceled it." I cut in firmly. "Stop pushing yourself. You're more important than any meeting." She froze, looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "You've changed," she said quietly. I gave a faint, bitter smile. "Bankruptcy changes people. That's not why." She shook her head slightly, leaning back against the pillow, her voice still weak. "The day before yesterday, I got a notice from the cafe. You paid our bill from that day." "Why?" I blinked, caught off guard that she knew. That day, after storming out of the cafe, I'd already walked quite a distance, but somehow my feet turned back on their own. I handed over the last few bills of cash I had and paid for the coffees. Before, I'd never cared about small things like that. After all, it was her black card we always used. But that day, something inside me told me I couldn't keep taking advantage of her. She was already carrying too much. She shouldn't have to carry me too. I coughed lightly and looked away. I just felt it was the right thing to do. She didn't press further. Instead, she reached out and gently held my fingertips. The instant our skin touched, a faint warmth spread through my chest. By noon, the doctor said she could go home to rest. I immediately called a cab and stayed by her side the whole way, afraid she'd bump into something. She still looked terribly weak, but at least the color had returned to her cheeks. Once we got back to the apartment, I tucked her into bed and went to the kitchen to reheat the porridge I'd made the night before. Surprisingly, it turned out quite well this time, maybe a bit thick, but rich and fragrant. Carrying the bowl, I sat beside her bed like a nervous student turning in his first assignment. "Try it. It's my first time cooking porridge." She took the bowl and scooped a spoonful. I watched her reaction like an investor waiting for approval. "It's good," she said softly. I grinned, genuinely happy, like a child being praised. "Really? Then have some more." She ate slowly, spoonful by spoonful. I sat beside her, watching each of her movements, and suddenly felt a strange sense of satisfaction. In the past, I'd spent tens of thousands taking girls to Michelin restaurants, but never had I felt that a moment like this could bring such peace. After finishing, she set the bowl down and looked at me. "George." I turned my head to respond, but I wasn't prepared for her next question. "Why are you staying?" I froze for a moment. She paused. "You could leave. This life, it's not what you wanted." I looked down at my hands. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe because, besides here, I don't have anywhere else to go." I lifted my head, and she was looking at me, her gaze as clear and calm as ever. In that moment, I felt as though she could see right through me. When I was 5, I didn't know where the courage came from, but I spoke. "My mom ran off with someone, left my dad alone. He started drinking, and every time he got drunk, he'd say I looked like my mom, and then he'd hit me." I absent-mindedly touched the scar on my left eyebrow. It was faint, barely noticeable now, but I'd never forgotten it. After that, I learned to win people over with my appearance. As long as you look good enough, people will give you things. I gave a light laugh, tinged with self-mockery. When I met you, I thought I'd found my ticket to a long-term meal ticket. I turned to look at her, my voice hoarse. But I didn't expect you'd respect me. You've never used money to shame me. Even though you know I don't expect anything from you. She didn't speak, but simply held my hand. We all live behind masks, George, she said softly. I looked at her. The rain had stopped outside, and a beam of sunlight slipped through the curtain gap, landing right on our clasped hands. So warm, it almost made me want to cry. 2 days later, her fever finally broke, and she was looking much better, but I still wouldn't let her work. I stubbornly took over a few of her meetings, calling everyone to reschedule. President Jean, this is George, Willow's husband. Yes. She has a slight cold. It's nothing serious. The doctor says some rest will do. Could we postpone the investment meeting for a week? Thank you for understanding. I hung up the phone and sighed with relief. This was the first time I'd ever officially dealt with people as Willow's husband. In the past, people called me President Lou's boy toy or the face of Lou Corporation. Now they addressed me as Mr. Wong. Felt pretty good. She came out of the bedroom, still looking a little pale, but her eyes were much brighter. Can you contact Margot for me? She asked. He works in medical equipment, and he might be interested in my new project. I frowned. Aren't you still not fully recovered? You should be resting. I'm much better now, she said seriously. And Marco's hard to get in touch with. If I miss this chance, there might not be another. I thought for a moment, and a name suddenly popped into my head. My eyes lit up. Marco. Is he the old guy who loves playing golf? I think I've seen him at the club. Willow paused, surprised, and nodded. You know him? I grinned. Not really, but I know how to get him. With that, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in a while. Hey, Jason, it's George. Yeah, long time no see. I heard your club's hosting a golf networking event next week. Can you get me a spot? I'll bring a friend. Of course, same deal as before. Thanks. I hung up the phone and winked at Willow. Done. Marco goes to Qingshan Golf Club every Tuesday without fail. We'll just bump into him next week. She stared at me in disbelief, asking, How do you know all this? I shrugged, pretending to downplay it. Been around the club scene for years. It's not all for nothing. I know all about those bosses' hobbies, schedules, even their mistresses. I paused, realizing how blunt that sounded, and awkwardly added, used to think this kind of information was just for flattery, but now I realize it can come in handy for more legitimate reasons. She suddenly laughed, a genuine laugh, the corners of her eyes crinkling with faint lines. George, you're really a treasure. Her words, light as they were, felt like a spark that ignited something deep in my chest. I suddenly realized that over the past 3 years, I had received countless expensive gifts, but none could compare to the preciousness of that smile. Later that evening, I went downstairs to take out the trash. As I reached the bottom of the building, I spotted the familiar black Mercedes parked across the street. This time I could tell for sure it wasn't passing by. Someone in the car was watching our building. The window cracked open just enough, like some subtle voyeurism. I deliberately walked toward the car, hoping to see who was inside, but as soon as I approached, the driver pressed the gas pedal, and the car sped off, clean and swift, without hesitation. When I returned to the apartment, I told Willow what had happened. The moment she heard, her expression darkened, and she coldly muttered a name. Makoto Ito. I frowned. What exactly does he have against you? Why does he act like a madman, obsessively hanging on? She fell silent for a long time, her fingers absent-mindedly rubbing the ring finger on her left hand, where her wedding ring used to be. But she had sold it off during the bankruptcy. It's a long story, she finally said, her voice barely audible. When the time is right, I'll tell you. I didn't press her. It wasn't that I didn't want to know. I just suddenly feared hearing the answer. The night grew deeper, and I lay on the makeshift bed I had set up in the living room. The pillow wasn't soft, the blanket a bit damp, and the ceiling had patches of peeling paint, but I didn't mind at all. In the bedroom, I could hear Willow's steady breathing, like a gentle lullaby. Listening to it, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. This shabby little apartment, compared to our former mansion, felt more like home. But I knew that lurking black Mercedes would be back. It was like a beast lying in wait, silently watching our lives, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. Chapter 5. The golf ball traced a graceful arc through the air, drawing a perfect curve before landing just on the edge of the green. I squinted my eyes and let out a mock sigh. Too bad. It almost went in. "Haha, George. You've really improved your game." Margot clapped me on the shoulder. He was in his 60s, a bit on the heavier side with a rosy complexion. He looked every bit the typical regular at the golf course. I shook my head with a smile. "Still a long way to go compared to you." I glanced over at Willow, who was chatting with another female entrepreneur. She exuded confidence, her words flowing smoothly. This was already the third day we'd run into Margot. Thanks to my past connections at the club, I managed to infiltrate this private golf event. At first, Margot was surprised to see me. But when I pretended to play just well enough, I kept the pacing slow, with emotional beats and pauses for breaths. Dots and ellipses were needed, every detail intact. If you want, I can continue Chapter 5 fully in the same calm, natural storytelling tone with dialogue, inner thoughts, and narration perfect for voice actors. Do you want me to continue? To not look like a total beginner, he happily took on the role of my coach. I knew that people like him, once they started mentoring, often began to feel a certain fondness. Seizing the opportunity, I casually asked, "I heard you've been looking into AI healthcare projects lately?" Marco raised an eyebrow, his eyes sharpening with a hint of suspicion, but he quickly relaxed, lowering his voice. "Yes, we're evaluating some options." I casually added, "My wife, Willow, used to do research on similar projects at Lou Corporation. She's got a lot of first-hand data." He froze for a moment, narrowing his eyes as he sized me up. "Willow Lou, the CEO of Lou Corporation?" I felt a rush of triumph in my chest, but kept my expression calm. "She started her own business now, working on a medical data platform. She's actually here today at the course." I nodded toward Willow. As expected, half an hour later, Willow was deep in conversation with Marco. Their discussion animated. I stepped aside, watching her from a distance. She seemed to radiate confidence and poise, a stark contrast to the woman I'd seen burning herself out with late-night work, sick in bed. "Didn't expect to see you here, Mr. Wong." A sharp voice came from behind me. "You've fallen so far. You're still getting into the Orange Cat Club?" I turned around and instantly recognized him. Martin, Makoto's right-hand man. Slicked back hair, perfectly tailored suit, and the flashy Richard Mille on his wrist. Everything about him screamed, "I'm doing better than you." I smirked. "Mr. Martin, long time no see." He scanned me up and down, his disdain unapologetically written on his face. "I heard you moved into some rundown apartment in the old part of town, so you're here today hoping to land a big catch and make a comeback." My fingers instinctively tightened around the golf club, but I forced myself to relax. "You're pretty well informed, Mr. Martin." But I took a step closer to him and lowered my voice. "I'm actually here with Mr. Ito. He's in the VIP room for a meeting." Sure enough, his expression shifted immediately. "Ito? That's impossible. He's supposed to be..." I raised an eyebrow. "Where exactly?" A flicker of unease crossed his face as he realized he might have let something slip. He immediately stopped smiling and coldly replied, "Are you trying to fish for information?" I shrugged, pretending to be unconcerned. "Just a casual question. Oh, and please say hello to Mr. Ito for me. Tell him the Liu family still remembers him." The moment those words left my mouth, Martin's face stiffened as though he'd been slapped. He paused for a second, as if I'd hit a nerve, before muttering a quick "excuse me" and walking away with brisk steps. Watching him leave, I felt a knot tighten in my chest. His reaction, it was too off. Later that evening, after the gathering ended, Willow and I got into a cab together. She looked in good spirits. Margot had shown clear interest in her project and had even set up a meeting for next week. "Everything went really well today," she said as she fastened her seatbelt and turned to smile at me. There was a rare ease in her expression. "Thank you, George." But my mind was still stuck on Martin's twisted expression from earlier. Her words barely registered, and I only muttered a distracted, "What's wrong?" she asked almost immediately. Her tone was gentle, but that sharp intuition of hers never missed a thing. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to tell her. "I ran into Martin, Makoto's right-hand man. I mentioned something on purpose," I said. "The Liu family still remembers him. Guess what?" His face went pale. He didn't even say goodbye, just bolted. She froze. I noticed her fingers tighten slightly, as if she were trying to restrain something inside her. "Why did you say that?" Her voice dropped, calm but guarded. "Instinct," I said, studying her profile. Then I added more directly, "Willow, what's really going on between Makoto and your family? I've asked before, but you've always avoided it." She didn't answer right away. Her gaze turned to the window. The cab rolled through the city center, where neon lights flickered across her face. Bright, then dim, then bright again, casting shifting shadows that mirrored the turbulence beneath her calm surface. After a long silence, she finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but every word carried weight. 10 years ago, my father's company almost went bankrupt because of Makoto. I froze but said nothing. They were business partners, she continued, her tone as if dragging the story up from somewhere deep and painful. But Makoto shorted our company's stock behind our backs. He even conspired with the banks to cut off our funding. During that time, my dad barely slept. I almost lost him. He nearly jumped off the building. My chest tightened as I looked at her. We'd been married 3 years, yet she'd never told me any of this. Later, he pulled through, took out a loan from loan sharks, saved the company. After restructuring and renaming, that's how Liu Corporation was born. Her voice grew hoarse as she lowered her head, staring at her intertwined fingers. Then, a few years later, Makoto's company got caught in a financial scandal. He was kicked out by his board. He's believed ever since that my father was the one who betrayed him. I hesitated, then asked quietly, "Was it him? Did your father really do it?" She stayed silent for a while, then slowly shook her head. "He never admitted it, but the truth, I honestly don't know." Something clicked in my mind. "Wait, you said that was 10 years ago. That would have been 2013, Willow said with a faint nod. Her face was composed, as if she were telling someone else's story. "My senior year in college. That year my dad's hair turned white overnight. I gave up my scholarship to study abroad and went straight into the company to help him." She smiled then, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "So, this bankruptcy, it's not the first time I've watched everything collapse." My throat tightened, as though something heavy had struck me in the chest. In that instant, I finally understood why Willow could remain calm amid disaster. Why she never cried, never raged, never cursed fate, because she had already walked through hell once before. And I, her husband, had known nothing. "Makoto's after you now? For revenge?" I asked. "Partly," Willow said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But there's another reason. He wants the algorithm my father developed." I froze. "You mean the one your new startup is built on?" She nodded. "It's Liu Corporation's most valuable asset. Even during the bankruptcy liquidation, I did everything I could to keep it. Makoto knows that. With it, I can rebuild. So he's working behind the scenes, spreading rumors that I've had a mental breakdown to scare off investors, while sending people to keep tabs on me." The traffic light turned red, and the taxi slowed to a stop. We both turned toward the window. On the massive LED screen outside the financial center, Makoto's face appeared, sharp suit, confident smile. looking every bit the man in control of the world. Neither of us spoke, but the air between us turned to ice. When we got home, I made 2 bowls of instant noodles. Ridiculous. Really, probably the only dish I'd learned to make lately. Willow was still lost in thought, absently stirring her noodles, unaware that I'd quietly gone easy on the seasoning. Her stomach was still weak. The doctor had warned us. Willow, I began carefully. Have you ever considered that the Lou Corporation's collapse might not have been just bad market timing? She lifted her head sharply, her eyes flashing. What do you mean? It was all too convenient. I set down my chopsticks, speaking calmer than I felt. Right after I refused to help Makoto pull strings, the bank suddenly withdrew the loans. Then one after another, the suppliers started calling in debts, flooding us with pressure. The whole chain reaction, it felt planned. Her expression grew sharper, the light in her eyes shifting, like something deep inside her had just caught fire. You're saying Makoto orchestrated it? I can't be sure, I said slowly. But if we can find proof, we can turn everything around. She finished the sentence for me. For the first time, I saw a spark of something fierce in her eyes, a glint of determination that cut through her usual calm. She suddenly reached across the table and grabbed my hand. George, help me. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was firm. I hesitated for half a second, then closed my hand over hers. How? I need to get close to him. Her gaze locked onto mine. He's wary of me, but not of you. You used to move in his circles. You know, Martin, you understand how those private networks work, the clubs, the whispers. You can talk to people I can't reach. I raised a brow. So, you want me to be a corporate spy? She bit her lip, paused, and said quietly, think of it as doing it for our future. Our future. The words burned in my chest. I'd never imagined the word future could exist in the same sentence as her and me. I looked straight into her eyes and nodded. All right, but I have one condition. She blinked. What is it? You're going to teach me, I said firmly. Teach me business, projects, data, financial reports. I don't want to live off my looks anymore. She was stunned for a moment, then smiled. Pride and tenderness mingled in her expression. Deal, she said softly. The following days felt like I had completely transformed. I began showing up at various social events, reconnecting with circles I had once frequented. On the outside, people still thought of me as the same charming, kept man, the one who lived off his connections with the Liu family, the same Wang Xiaoya who enjoyed a lavish lifestyle. But only Willow and I knew that every drink I raised, every casual greeting, every round of cards, I was just laying the groundwork to gather crucial information. When I got home at night, I sat at the dining table and shared every fragment of information I'd gathered. From Martin, from the booze-fueled gatherings, from the club security guards. Martin says Makoto has been flying to Hong Kong a lot lately, always using a private channel without his assistant. He also mentioned that the third quarter profit showed a huge increase, but the main business revenue dropped, and the numbers don't add up. Makoto's nephew slipped up when drunk, saying Uncle's old trick worked again. These pieces of information I'd collected began to form a blurry puzzle. Every piece pointed to one person, Makoto. He'd never been a clean businessman, and I should have known that all along. Late that night, I returned from a long and exhausting social event, reeking of smoke and cheap laughter, but my mind was unusually clear. As I entered the house, the dim warm light made me feel disoriented. Willow was at the dining table, asleep, her hair was messy, and a thick stack of documents and scribbled notes were scattered around her. I walked over and looked down. She had drawn a complex relationship map. At the center was a picture of Makoto, surrounded by several banks, shell companies, and familiar supplier names. My heart tightened. She had gone even deeper into this than I had. I crouched down and gently lifted her from the table. She was much lighter than I'd expected, and as I cradled her against my shoulder, I could almost hear the brittle sound of her bones. George, she murmured groggily, her voice nasally, with a hint of childishness. Go back to sleep, I whispered, carrying her to the bedroom and carefully laying her on the bed. But she didn't let go. Instead, she wrapped her arms tightly around my neck and whispered softly, "Cold." I froze, my whole body going rigid. Her face was so close to mine that I could see the slight trembling of her eyelashes and smell the faint citrus scent in her hair. In that moment, I almost forgot what we were fighting against, forgot about the bankruptcy, the surveillance, the media, the coldness of people's hearts. All I knew was that she was in my arms, soft, warm, and mine. I slowly laid down beside her, pulling her close. She didn't resist. Instead, she leaned into me, and we silently embraced in the darkness, only the sound of our breathing filling the room. I found something, I said hoarsely, breaking the silence. Makoto is likely manipulating several key suppliers through his shell companies to orchestrate a squeeze on Lu Corporation. I could feel her body tense up instantly. Are you sure? I sighed. Not enough. The evidence is too thin. We need to dig deeper. She didn't respond immediately. I thought she was going to fall back into her usual calm, analytical silence, but instead, she suddenly rolled over, moved closer, and almost tentatively pressed a kiss to my lips. That kiss was as light as a feather, yet it stirred a storm within me. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't know exactly what she was thanking me for. Was it for gathering the information? For staying up all night trying to piece the truth together? Or was it simply for being here with her, silently holding her as we walked this thorny path together? I didn't ask. I just held her tighter. At that moment, I'd never been more certain. She was no longer just the icy CEO of Lu Corporation, a symbol in the business world, the woman who once felt so distant and untouchable. She was my wife, and I was the only person she could rely on right now. Outside, I heard the sound of tires grinding against the asphalt. Without needing to look, I knew the black Mercedes had arrived again. The guy was like a greedy vulture, watching us from below, waiting for us to make a mistake, waiting to pounce. But what he didn't know was that we weren't the same estranged couple we once were. We were now comrades in arms, the strongest of allies in the storm. Chapter 6. Congratulations, President Lu. We've decided to invest in your project. President Jean smiled as he extended his hand to Willow. I stood behind her, just a step away, and clearly saw her fingers tremble. From moving into that cramped little apartment to today, securing the first round of funding, we had held on for 3 months. Willow had worked until the early hours for 92 consecutive days, and I had sat at the conference table for the first time as her assistant, dressed in a rented suit, clutching the materials I had prepared all week. I knew every page by heart. I could even recite the key data in my sleep. "Thank you all for your trust," she said, her voice clear and firm. "Medical data analysis is the blue ocean of the next decade. I won't disappoint you." She said it so calmly, but only I knew what she had been through to get here. Once outside the building, the sun was shining brightly. Willow walked ahead of me, her steps lighter than before. The sunlight hit her face, her features almost translucent in the glow. She had lost so much weight, her suit jacket hanging loosely around her. I suddenly felt a pang of sympathy and almost reached out to steady her, but hesitated. It wasn't until we got in the car and she grabbed my arm that I noticed she was smiling, like a little girl. "We did it. First round of funding, 20 million. Her eyes sparkled like they were about to shine. Enough to launch the project. I laughed with her, like we'd just won a hard-fought battle. "You're amazing, Willow. I knew you could do it." "It's we," she corrected me gently, pinching my arm. "Without you helping me with the connections, doing the research, and keeping an eye on Martin, I never could have gotten the investment this fast." "We," I repeated, savoring the word, my heart warming. "By the way," she said, flipping through her papers, "there's a cocktail party after the signing ceremony next week. You'll need to prepare for that." "No problem." I glanced at her as I started the car. "But before that, you need to see a doctor." She frowned in confusion. What doctor? Stop pretending, I said, pointing to her stomach. This week. I've woken up 3 times in the middle of the night to find you throwing up in the bathroom. Your stomach pains are happening more often. She turned her head away. It's just stress, she murmured. I didn't back down. Either you go to the hospital tomorrow, or I'll carry you there myself. She was clearly taken aback by my tone. This was probably the first time I had spoken to her with such unwavering authority. She looked at me for a while, then whispered, "Tomorrow afternoon. I have a half-hour window." I nodded. Deal. The next day, I arrived 20 minutes early and waited downstairs in her office building. When she came down, she looked worse than yesterday. Dark circles under her eyes, her lips pale as paper. You stayed up again, I frowned. She weakly waved her hand. Just revising some proposals. Before she could finish, she suddenly bent forward, clutching her stomach. Without thinking, I flagged down a taxi, hurriedly put her inside, and rushed to the city center hospital. The scent of disinfectant was strong in the air as I helped her into the gastroenterology department. She was still putting up a brave front, walking stiffly as if she wouldn't allow herself to show weakness. Director Justin, an old friend of her father's, helped us bypass the regular queues and get an emergency appointment. After listening to her symptoms, he furrowed his brow. We need to do a gastroscopy first. I knew it wasn't a comfortable test, but I hadn't expected the process to be so difficult for me. I stood outside the examination room, watching through the glass as Willow lay on the bed, while the doctor inserted that long, thin tube down her throat. Her fingers gripped the sheets so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her face was pale, and tears welled in the corners of her eyes. In that moment, I wished I could take her place, take that pain for her. When the test was finally over, she leaned against me as we walked out, her entire body limp. I helped her sit down and rushed to buy 2 cups of hot tea. When I returned, she was resting with her eyes closed, her face carrying an exhaustion that didn't belong to her. The kind that came from somewhere deep inside, beyond strength or will. Thank you, she murmured as she took the cup, her fingers icy cold. Half an hour later, we were called back into the doctor's office. The doctor's face was grave. A thick report spread across his desk. In that instant, my heart began to sink. Miss Liu, Director Justin said, his tone heavy. The results show you have a gastric ulcer about 2 centimeters wide. The edges are irregular. His words hit me like a blunt strike to the head. We'll need to wait 3 days for the biopsy, but from my experience, it's very likely early-stage stomach cancer. I froze. Completely. I heard Willow draw in a sharp breath. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her fingers tighten on her knees, but she didn't say a word. Her face remained calm. Too calm. Chillingly calm. Are you sure? She asked, her voice steady, almost unnaturally so. About an 80% chance, Justin sighed. You've had poor eating habits, high stress, and a family history. Family history? I asked hoarsely, my throat dry. What do you mean? My mother died of stomach cancer, Willow said softly. When I was 12. I didn't know what to say. It felt like someone had poured a bucket of ice water into my chest. After all these years, I realized I'd never really known her. She'd always seemed so composed, so rational, so indestructible, and I'd never seen what kind of pain that armor was hiding. The good news is that it was caught early, Justin added quickly. The cure rate is high, but you'll need to schedule surgery and follow-up treatment as soon as possible. When we left the consultation room, she walked fast. Too fast. I nearly had to jog to keep up. At the hospital entrance, she flagged down a taxi and gave the driver her company's address. The office. I stared at her, disbelieving. Now, you should go home and rest. She didn't even look at me. The contract isn't signed yet. The project needs to start. If I really have to go through surgery, I need to get everything in order first. I grabbed her wrist harder than I'd ever dared before. Willow, stop. You just got told you might have cancer. Can't you? Just for 1 hour? Let yourself breathe. I don't have time to fall apart, she snapped, her voice breaking, her eyes red. Do you have any idea what it cost me to get here? I can't collapse, not now. If I fall, Makoto will come for me, and he'll tear apart everything I have left. Her whole body was trembling. For the first time, I saw her truly lose control, like a string pulled so tight it was about to snap. I didn't care how she struggled. I pulled her into my arms and held her tight. You won't fall, I whispered against her ear. Not while I'm here. Even if the sky comes crashing down, I'll hold it up for you. She froze for 2 seconds. Then her body went soft, collapsing against me. Her head pressed into my chest, and her tears burned through my shirt like fire. In that moment, she wasn't the CEO, or the strategist, or the indomitable woman who'd faced ruin with dry eyes. She was just a soldier who had finally put down her armor and allowed herself to cry. I didn't move. I just held her, as if by doing so I could keep the world itself from breaking. That night, for the first time in a long while, she went to bed early. I sat by her side, holding her hand, so thin, so cold. Staring at the ceiling, I said quietly, I looked it up. Early-stage gastric cancer has a 5-year survival rate over 90%. You're going to be fine. She kept her eyes on the ceiling, saying nothing. Then suddenly, she whispered, You know what I'm most afraid of? Not dying, but losing everything. Right when I'm about to succeed. I turned my head toward her. 10 years ago, she continued, her voice barely above a murmur. My father had just survived Makoto's betrayal. The company was preparing to go public. Then he had a cerebral hemorrhage, and he never made it back to the boardroom. She closed her eyes before going on. I've been fighting ever since. Just so I wouldn't end up like him. My chest tightened painfully. For the first time, I truly understood her madness, her obsession with perfection, the sleepless nights, the endless revisions, the pain she endured without complaint. She wasn't driven by greed. She was racing against fate itself. This time won't be the same, I said, gripping her hand tighter. You have me. This time you're not alone. She turned her face toward me, her eyes shining in the dim light. Why? She asked softly. You could have left. Why are you still here? I stood still for a while, searching for an answer. Why? First, it was because I had nowhere else to go. Later, it was out of guilt, watching her hold herself together. Then I saw her secretly throwing up blood after a late-night fever, hiding in the bathroom without making a sound. She had always been struggling, never asking for my help. But I began to care about everything she did, the way she looked at things, the way her shoulders tensed, how she quietly rubbed her stomach while eating. She made me want to be someone she could rely on. Because, I looked at her, speaking slowly, I want to see how far we can go together. The day the test results came back, I sat with Willow in the doctor's office, listening to Director Justin speak in his usual calm tone. The biopsy results came back. It's early-stage stomach cancer, he said. Felt like I'd been punched in the chest. I had prepared myself for this, but hearing it out loud, my mind went blank. The surgery was scheduled for a week later. For the next 7 days, Willow seemed like a person possessed, obsessively arranging every detail for the project's launch. I had never seen anyone push themselves so relentlessly, like she was trying to finish everything perfectly in the time she had left. And for the first time, I took something seriously myself. I contacted the hospital, handled the paperwork, prepared the surgery fees, and even researched post-surgery care. I watched short training videos on how to care for patients. Willow had never asked me to do any of this, but I knew I had to. One day, when she saw that I had prepaid $50,000 for the surgery, her voice was full of suspicion. Where did you get the money for the deposit? I shrugged. Sold a few watches. She paused for a moment. Those watches were the most precious things I owned. Things I'd rather have borrowed money than sold. Don't make that face. I squeezed her cheek gently. I don't have many occasions to wear them anymore. Selling them actually feels a little freeing. The night before the surgery, she finally allowed herself to rest. We sat on the small apartment balcony, the May evening breeze carrying the scent of flowers. The distant neon lights flickered on and off, and for a moment, I almost wanted to convince myself that everything was just as it should be. She suddenly spoke. I made a list. A list. I turned to look at her. If... She lowered her head and pulled out a piece of paper. If the surgery doesn't go well, this is a list of the company's resources, contacts, passwords. You'll need it later. My chest tightened. I pushed the paper back into her hands. I don't need this. You said you'd handle the company. You're going to recover. Remember? She didn't look at me, her gaze fixed on the distance. I just want to be prepared. When my father was sick, he left nothing behind. I don't want that. I turned around, gripping her shoulders tightly. Look at me, Willow. You're not your father. This won't repeat itself. You'll wake up, and we'll watch the company rise together. We'll fight Makoto together and we'll... My throat tightened. We'll grow old together. Her eyes glistened with tears, and she gently leaned into my chest. Promise me one thing. What? If tomorrow, after the surgery, the doctor tells you the results are bad, don't hide it from me. I want to know the truth. I nodded, pulling her closer. I promise. The surgery lasted 4 hours. I waited outside, pacing back and forth, drinking 6 cups of undrinkable coffee. Every second felt like torture, like a question I couldn't answer. If something happened to her, what would I do? Finally, when Director Justin came out, I almost collapsed. The surgery was very successful, he said. The tumor was completely removed with no signs of spreading. She's very lucky. In that moment, I almost cried. When I walked into the recovery room and saw her pale face with an A4 line in her hand, lying there so quietly, I finally understood what real fear was. It wasn't bankruptcy. It wasn't poverty. It was the fear of losing her. At that moment, I realized I had already fallen in love with her, not because of who she was or what she could give me, but simply because she was her. She woke up in the middle of the night as the anesthesia wore off, her face contorting in pain. I quickly pressed the call button for the nurse, gently moistening her cracked lips with a wet cotton swab. Did it work? She asked weakly. I nodded and leaned over to kiss her forehead. It was very successful. The doctor says you'll live for another 50 years. She gave a faint smile, light as moonlight on the hospital bed. And what about our company? Our company will wait for you to recover. I cupped her face, continuing. Nothing else matters. She closed her eyes, but her hand tightened around mine, as if afraid that if she let go, I might disappear. I sat beside her, watching her breath steady slowly, and for the first time, I seriously thought about the weight of the word forever. Rainwater slowly traced down the window, the city lights blurring in front of me. I sat in a cafe across from Ito Corporation's building, holding a cup of now-cold coffee, my gaze fixed on the lit window, Makoto Ito's private office. This was the 3rd consecutive day I had been observing him here. I had learned his routine. Every Wednesday night, from 8 to 9, he was alone in the office, going through documents with only his bodyguard outside. This was the best opportunity one had. I glanced at my watch, 7:50. I took a deep breath, drank the bitter coffee in one go, grabbed the briefcase at my feet, and walked out into the light rain. The rain soaked my shoulders and crept under my collar, but I paid no attention to it. At exactly 8 o'clock, I entered the Ito Corporation building. Impeccably dressed in a suit, wearing the practiced social smile I had honed over the years, looking like any other employee working late. Good evening. Do you have an appointment? The receptionist looked up at me. I smiled and raised my chin slightly. I'm a guest of Mr. Martin, meeting at 8, from the marketing department. She glanced down at the registration book. Mr. Martin doesn't seem to be here today. That's strange. He said he would be waiting for me on the 28th floor. I frowned, pretending to scroll through my phone. Let me call him to confirm. Before she could respond, I quickly made my way to the elevator, pulling out the access card I had obtained from Martin's assistant, for a high price. I swiped it skillfully and pressed the button for the 28th floor. The elevator doors closed, and I caught a glimpse of the receptionist hurriedly picking up the phone. Every second in the elevator felt like a test of patience. When it finally reached the 28th floor, everything was as I expected, quiet with only the office at the end of the hall lit up. I could hear Makoto's voice through the door, his tone indifferent and measured. Keep an eye on Willow. Yes, her new company must be taken down, no matter the cost. My fist clenched involuntarily. I crouched low and slipped into the nearby secretary room, hiding in the dark, the faint blue light from a computer screen the only source of illumination. I quietly closed the door behind me and took out the white gloves and small camera I had brought. 10 minutes, I whispered to myself. I knew that if he left the office, whether for the restroom or to meet someone, I would have 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes would be enough. Second dragged on like an eternity. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, my palms sweating, my back cold. Finally, 20 minutes later, the office door clicked open. Makoto left, his footsteps firm and steady, echoing down the hall. Without hesitation, I slipped into his office. The desk was a massive, custom-made redwood piece, imposing and elegant. I circled to the back, crouched down, and checked the drawers locked, as expected. No problem. I had planned for this moment. Years of mingling in high society circles had taught me more than just how to drink and flatter people. I had learned more practical skills. 30 seconds. The lock clicked open. Inside the drawers were neatly organized several stacks of documents. I quickly sifted through them, scanning each page's title like a radar. Suddenly, a folder labeled Lou Corporation, Confidential caught my eye. My heart skipped a beat as my fingers trembled slightly while opening it. The first page made my blood run cold. It was a detailed plan, meticulously written, outlining how to manipulate bank credit, cut off the supply chain, and use media influence to systematically destroy Lou Corporation. The document's date was 3 months before Lou Corporation's bankruptcy. So, it was you old fox. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to suppress the surge of emotion, quickly pulling out my miniature camera and snapping pictures of every page. Each shutter click felt like a silent accusation. As I was flipping through the last few pages, the sound of footsteps suddenly reached my ears. Slow, deliberate, and getting closer. Shit, he came back too soon. I frantically shoved the document back into the drawer, my fingers slipping in my haste. The angle of the papers wasn't perfect, and I couldn't restore it in time. The footsteps were already almost upon me. I quickly scanned the room. The only exit was the inconspicuous break room inside the office. I bolted for it, gently closing the door behind me, holding my breath as I pressed my body against it. Through the crack in the door, I saw Makoto enter the room, his face as calm as always. He walked to the desk, his brows furrowing slightly. Strange, he muttered to himself, his fingers running over the lock of the drawer. I'm sure I locked it. Every nerve in my body was on high alert. My heartbeat thundered in my chest, the blood rushing in my ears so loudly I could barely hear. He pulled out his phone. Security, check the 28th floor footage. Has anyone entered my office just now? I couldn't wait any longer. I shoved open the door, knocking over the chair beside him, and sprinted out. Stop him, Makoto shouted. I bolted toward the elevator, smashing the button, but it didn't respond. The system was locked. Damn it. Without thinking, I spun around and ran toward the fire escape. My footsteps thundered on the metal stairs, echoing loudly. I could already hear footsteps behind me. At least 3 people were chasing me. I ran desperately down the stairs, 13th floor, 12th floor. My breath burned in my lungs. When I reached the 15th floor, I suddenly changed direction and dashed into the office area. The office was empty. I darted into a storage room, quietly shutting the door. My body pressed against it as I collapsed, drenched in sweat, feeling like I had just been pulled from a lake. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was Willow. I didn't dare answer, only tapping the preset message. Safe. We'll contact later. 5 minutes later, the noise outside gradually faded. I cautiously opened the door and peeked out. Nothing. I stepped out of the storage room, took a few deep breaths, adjusted my sweat-soaked suit jacket, and tried to regain my composure. I began walking toward the elevator. Just as I was about to reach it, a familiar, chilling voice sounded behind me. "George, long time no see." I spun around. And of course, there he was, Martin, flanked by two large men in black. He was casually twirling a switchblade, grinning like a sly fox. "Mr. Ito would like to invite you for a cup of tea," he said. I took a step back, pressing my back against the cold wall. "No need. Please thank Mr. Ito for his kind offer. That's not for you to decide." He flicked his fingers, and the two big men lunged at me immediately. I sidestepped the first one, but couldn't avoid the second man's heavy punch. It landed squarely in my stomach, the pain enough to make me bend over. But my body had its own memory. The instincts honed years ago at clubbing and drinking sessions kicked in, and without hesitation, I threw an elbow into the second man's face. There was a satisfying crack, the sound of my elbow connecting with his jaw almost more satisfying than the punch itself. "Damn, you can actually fight," Martin cursed, his playful tone now gone. He stepped in, ready to take charge himself. I was about to rush at him, but then I saw him pull out the spring-loaded knife, its cold gleam flashing in the dim light. My left arm went numb, followed by a rush of warmth as blood quickly began to slide down my sleeve. "Hand it over," he demanded, stepping closer, his voice cold and cruel. "Mr. Ito knows what you've filmed." I gritted my teeth, forcing out a twisted smile. "What? I'm just here to see an old friend. Nostalgia, you know?" Still talking. He slashed again, the blade cutting into my side, the pain so sharp I almost cried out. I leaned against the wall, gasping for air, realizing that tonight I might not make it out of this building. But I couldn't give up. The photos, the evidence, those were Willow's only chance to strike back. "Fine." I slowly raised one hand. "Come and get it. It's in my pocket." Sure enough, Martin came closer. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I threw all my strength into a headbutt to his nose. Crack. Blood sprayed everywhere. He screamed in pain, stumbling backward, and I seized the opportunity to bolt toward the stairwell. But I was too injured. My movements felt like a nightmare, too slow. I turned onto the 14th floor, but before I could make it any further, a kick caught me in the back, sending me crashing to the ground. My head slammed into the concrete stairs, and a wave of dizziness nearly consumed me. I vaguely felt someone rummaging through my pockets, taking my phone and wallet, but they didn't search my socks, the place where I had hidden the camera. "Nothing here. Take him back and ask him properly." Martin's voice came, sounding like he was pinching his nose, likely hurt from my head, but I knew that once they took me to Makoto, it would be over. So, with every ounce of strength I had left, I broke free from their hold, climbed over the stair railing, and threw myself down, falling toward the 13th floor. And then, everything went black. Chapter 7. When I woke up again, the bright lights felt like blades scraping against my eyeballs. I tried to move my eyelids, but the pain was immediate, forcing me to close them again. "Are you awake?" It was Willow's voice. I gathered all my strength to open my eyes and saw her exhausted face, her eyes red and swollen from crying. But at that moment, her expression was as cold as ice. "H Hospital." I managed to squeeze out a little sound. "City Center Hospital." Her voice trembled. "You fell down the stairs. You have a skull fracture, 2 broken ribs, 12 stitches in your left arm, and a concussion." She nearly screamed. "What the hell were you thinking? Are you crazy?" I wanted to laugh, but my face twitched in pain. I could only force a smile, pulling at my lips. "I was thinking about our future." She suddenly jumped to her feet, the chair scraping across the floor with an ear-piercing screech. "Do you know you almost died? For a few pictures? Was it worth it?" I lifted the hand that wasn't hooked up to N4, struggling to grab her wrist. Even the slightest pressure made my whole body shake. "It was worth it," I said with difficulty. "The camera. It's in my sock. Makoto's plan. I got it all." She froze, her body deflating like a balloon losing air. She sat back down, covering her face with her hands. "You idiot!" Her voice cracked. I'd rather you hadn't gone. I don't even need those things." I had never seen her like this. Not during the company's bankruptcy. Not in the hospital. Not when investors mocked her. She was always calm, cold as steel, like a sharp knife. But now, she didn't cry a single tear, yet the sight of her breaking down made my heart ache like it was being torn open. I opened my arms despite the pain, trying to pull her into an embrace. "Willow," I spoke weakly. "Listen to me. The camera." "I have it," she interrupted, taking a deep breath as though trying to suppress her emotions. "The photos are already downloaded. The evidence is solid. It's enough to prove that Makoto orchestrated Lou's bankruptcy." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of peace and satisfaction. My vision blurred, and I closed my eyes for a moment, murmuring, "That's good." Her voice shot up as if a broken violin string had snapped. "Do you know what it felt like when I got the hospital call? When they said you were covered in blood and brought in? I thought you were dead." She choked on her words. I forced my eyes open again and saw 2 distinct tear tracks down her cheeks, one drop after another falling without warning. I had never seen her cry, not even when the company went bankrupt, not when the cancer diagnosis came. She had always calmly arranged everything, as composed as a general on the battlefield. But now, she was crying. Because of me. "I'm sorry." I looked at her, my voice hoarse but sincere. "But I had to do it." "Why?" She almost shouted, her voice hoarse and trembling. "You've never been the kind of person to sacrifice yourself for others. You could have avoided it. You could have run. Because I love you." I interrupted her, my voice soft but it shattered the silence in the room. The only sound left was the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. She froze, eyes wide as she looked at me, lips trembling, unable to say a word. I managed a faint smile, though it made my ribs ache, and said, "I know this sounds ridiculous. When we got married 3 years ago, I only saw you as a long-term meal ticket. You were strong, calm, and had everything I never had. I lived off of you, and I was comfortable with that." I paused, throat dry. "But the day Lou Corporation went bankrupt, my first reaction wasn't to figure out how to escape. It was to think about what you would do. I realized that I didn't want to go anywhere, but be by your side." Her tears fell faster, but she still didn't say anything. "For the past few months, I've seen the real you," I continued, my voice hoarse as if it had been sliced. "You're strong, smart, stubborn as hell. But I've also seen the real me. I'm not just some useless, shallow guy who parties all the time. I can protect you, even if just a little." I reached out and held her hand. Her fingers were cold, but she gripped mine tightly, like she was afraid I'd disappear the next second. "So yes, I love you." I looked into her eyes, not flinching or avoiding her gaze. "Not because you're Lou Corporation's CEO, not because you have money or resources, but because you are you." She lowered her head, her forehead gently resting on the back of our joined hands, her body shaking. Tears fell one by one onto my hand, burning like fire. "You idiot," she choked out, her voice thick with emotion. "Why did you have to wait until you were half dead to say all this?" I wiped away her tears with my thumb. "Now you know, so stop crying. I'm still here, aren't I? Good for nothing." She suddenly snapped, eyes red as she glared at me. "The doctor said you need to stay in bed for 2 weeks. I grinned despite the pain that made me wince. "Well then, it's perfect. You can take care of me just like I've been taking care of you." She finally smiled, laughing and crying at the same time, gently slapping me. "Dream on." Before I could bask in my small victory, she suddenly grew serious again. "But we can't slack off. Makoto won't let this go. He's probably figured out we're investigating him." I nodded, the pain washing over me in waves. I took a deep breath. "We need to move faster. Can those photos send him to jail?" "Not enough." She shook her head, her eyes filled with calm calculation. "That's just the first step. We need to dig into his tax issues, his fund transfers, insider trading. We need to drag him down completely so he doesn't have a chance to recover. I thought for a moment. Martin mentioned that Makoto's been flying to Hong Kong a lot lately. Could it have something to do with money laundering, offshore accounts? Her eyes lit up. Very likely. I'll have people look into it. She stood up, bent down, and kissed my forehead. You rest and heal. I'll take care of the rest. I grabbed her hand, my tone serious. Be careful. He's desperate now, and a cornered animal is dangerous. She nodded, a flash of determination in her eyes. Don't worry, I'm not alone this time. I've contacted a few of my father's old friends and some of the senior lawyers from Lu Corporation. Makoto's messed with the wrong people. As she left the room, I suddenly realized I wasn't just her burden anymore. I was truly someone standing beside her, fighting with her. I stared at the ceiling, feeling the sting of my wounds and the ache in my ribs, but my heart felt more at peace than it ever had before. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew this. Starting today, I would fight for her and never retreat. The rain had stopped outside. Under the evening sky, the whole city seemed to wake up in the glow of the lights. I knew that our battle had only just begun. Chapter 8. The day I was discharged, the sunlight was more blinding than any I remembered. I stood at the entrance of the hospital, squinting as I tried to adjust to the light. My left arm was still in a sling, and the few wounds on my ribs ached with every breath I took. Willow stood beside me, holding my luggage, her hand lightly resting on my back. The gesture was gentle, yet it made me feel like everything was steady again. Don't make that face. I forced a smile, trying to look like a normal person. The doctor said I'm recovering well. She rolled her eyes at me. A concussion and a broken bone? And you call that well? But I still saw the subtle curve at the corner of her mouth she was trying to hide, indicating her mood was better. A black sedan slowly stopped in front of us. I raised an eyebrow and turned to her. Rental. Bought it. Her tone was as decisive as ever. Secondhand, but in good condition. We can't keep relying on taxis. I whistled. Sounds like the financing went well. As soon as I sat in the car, I realized this was no ordinary second-hand vehicle. The exterior was low-key, but the interior was all top-notch, with leather seats and a central console that emitted a futuristic glow. Willow started the engine, and the roar was deep and powerful. I could tell it had been modified. You did something to this car? I asked. She smirked. Bulletproof glass, reinforced body, and an independent tracking system. She glanced at me briefly. You think I did this just to show off? Makoto won't let this go. A surge of indescribable emotion welled up inside me. This woman had quietly considered all the dangers for me. In the past, she used to coldly say, "Be careful." But now, she was showing her care with a car. The car didn't head toward our small apartment. Instead, it drove into a high-end residential area in the city center. I raised an eyebrow and asked, "Did we move?" "Temporarily rented. Good security," she said. "We'll decide where to go after everything's over." The new apartment was on the top floor, spacious, bright, with a panoramic view. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking at the city, my emotions in turmoil. 3 months ago, we were living in that moldy old building, surviving on porridge, carrying debt, and supporting each other. Now, it wasn't quite a comeback, but I knew the battlefield that belonged to us had changed. "Do you like it?" she asked, walking over to me. I nodded, but my gaze fell on the pile of documents and her laptop on the coffee table. "Did you bring all this with you?" She nodded, and her expression suddenly turned serious. "We need to talk." We sat down on the sofa together. She opened the laptop, and on the screen was a meticulously organized document listing Makoto's various illegal activities, manipulating stock prices, corporate fraud, even money laundering. I stared at the words, unable to resist whistling. This is enough to send him to jail. That's the problem. She bit her lip and pulled up another document. Makoto isn't alone. Behind him is an entire network of interests, government officials, high-ranking bank executives. If we make this public, we'll make a lot of enemies. I finished her sentence, furrowing my brow. And before the trial even starts, they might destroy all the evidence. Her voice dropped. It's not just about that. You'll also become a target. He's already gone after you once. If he finds out we have all this. I reached out and took her hand. So, you're worried about me? Of course I am, Willow almost shouted, then lowered her voice. Look at the way you are now. If next time it's not a broken bone. But, her voice faltered. I froze for a moment. The first time I truly saw tears glistening in her eyes. The woman who was decisive in business was now losing control because she was worried about me. Willow? I comforted her softly. I'm not afraid of danger. I'm just afraid I won't be able to help. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. I know, but we need to come up with a foolproof plan. I stayed silent for a moment, and then a thought flashed through my mind. My heart tightened. Maybe I need to contact someone. She looked up at me. Who? My father, I said, and even I found it hard to believe as the words left my mouth. Willow visibly froze. In our 3 years of marriage, I had almost never brought up my father on my own. She only knew that my relationship with him was terrible. Your father, isn't he a prosecutor? She asked tentatively. I nodded, a sardonic smile tugging at my lips. Luis, deputy chief prosecutor of the provincial procuratorate, they call him iron-faced. Cold to everyone. I paused, my expression darkening. He's also been my #1 enemy for 20 years. Because of your mother? She asked softly. Partly. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights blurred by night, my chest churning. I hate him, not just because he drank and beat me, but because he had the power to investigate what happened to my mother and chose to give up. Footsteps approached from behind. Willow slipped her arms around me carefully, deliberately avoiding my wounds, and asked, Are you sure you want to contact him? I turned and looked her in the eye. For you, I'm willing to try. His resources and connections in the justice system are vital to us. She looked at me with a complicated expression, eyes weighing, hurting. In the end, she only nodded. If you're ready, I support you. I took out my phone. My finger hovered over the number in my contacts for a long time. My heart drummed in my chest. At last, I pressed call. When the line connected, my throat tightened. Hello. A low, stern voice came through. Dad, it's me. My voice trembled. There was a few seconds silence. George. Yeah. I inhaled deeply and forced myself calm. I need your help. The long silence made me think he'd hung up. Then he spoke again. What is it? I briefly explained Makoto's illegal activities and the evidence Willow and I had, careful to avoid personal emotion. After listening, my father fired a few sharp, professional questions that made me uneasy, then said only, Send the evidence to my email. The address hasn't changed. No promise, no warmth, but no refusal either. That was Luis, always businesslike. After the call ended, I realized my back was covered in cold sweat. Willow handed me a glass of water. My fingers still trembled when I took it. He said he'll look at the evidence. I managed a weak smile. For him, that was as enthusiastic as it gets. She squeezed my shoulder gently. Thank you. I shook my head. Don't thank me. We've been in the same boat for a long time. I hesitated, then added, The strange part is, when I mentioned the feud between Makoto and the Lius, he didn't seem surprised at all. It was like he already knew something. Willow frowned. What do you mean? Not sure. I swallowed the unease. He told me to meet tomorrow to discuss it in detail. We'll know then. The next afternoon, I went alone to the tea house we'd agreed on. It was an old place tucked in an alley in the city center. Antique, quiet to the point of being uncanny. The moment I pushed the door open, I saw my father. Already seated in a corner, a crisp suit, hair much grayer than in my memory but still meticulously combed, deep lines on his face, eyes sharp as an eagle's. I walked over, my voice stiff. "Dad." He looked up at me, and his gaze cut like a blade. "How's the injury?" I was taken aback. I hadn't expected him to ask that first. "It's okay. Getting better." He nodded and pushed a folder across the table. I opened it, his legal analysis, the handwriting so neat it looked printed. "The evidence is solid, but not enough to shake Makoto," he said. "You have two options now. 1, quietly trade favors and keep things low-key, or 2, dig deeper and strike decisively." I didn't hesitate. The second option. A fleeting emotion I couldn't read passed through his eyes. He said, "Your mother was just like that." I froze. It was the first time in 20 years we had directly mentioned her. I cautiously asked, "Dad, did you know about the Liu family's situation all along?" He fell silent for a few seconds before pulling out an old yellowed file from his bag. "I handled a case 25 years ago. You'll understand when you read this." I opened it and froze when I saw the first page. Victim: Pablo Liu. Suspect: Makoto. It was the file for an attempted murder case. "Willow never mentioned this," I murmured. "She probably doesn't know," he sighed. At the time, the evidence was insufficient and I was powerless. I kept flipping through the pages until I came across a familiar name. Sandra, Willow's mother. She was the only witness, yet she mysteriously passed away just before testifying. I whispered, "Stomach cancer." My father asked without expression, "Quite a coincidence, isn't it?" I closed my eyes, holding back my anger. "Dad, will you help us this time?" He nodded. "I'll assist you legally, but catching Makoto, that's up to you." When I left the tea house, my mind was a whirlwind. He had been more cooperative than I expected, and it made me see a glimpse of the justice he once had. But as soon as I got home, I noticed a slip of paper wedged under the door. 8 p.m. Violet Hotel, room 2808. Come alone. Maria. Maria. I frowned. We had cut ties months ago. Her sudden reappearance meant something was off. I handed the note and case files to Willow. As she examined the documents, her face grew paler. "So the grudge between us runs deeper than I thought." I wrapped my arm around her shoulder. "We'll make him pay for it." She nodded and glanced at the note. "Are you going to meet Maria?" I stared at the note, my gaze turning cold. If she's really been bought by Makoto, I want to see what game he's playing now. "Are you going alone?" A sharp glint flashed in my eyes as I answered without hesitation. "Of course not. We're going together." At 7:50 p.m., Willow and I arrived at the Violet Hotel ahead of schedule. Following my father's advice, we had booked a room directly opposite room 2808, just in case of a setup. I entered 2808 alone while Willow stayed in the room across the hall, monitoring everything with preset micro cameras. The moment I opened the door, Maria was already waiting inside. She wore a revealing red dress, her makeup so heavy it was almost blinding. As soon as she saw me, she plastered on an exaggerated smile. "Young Master Wong, long time no see." I stood at the door unmoving and said bluntly, "What's this about? So cold?" She pouted, taking a few steps closer with a playful gait. "I heard you've been having a rough time lately. Makoto's been making your life miserable, hasn't he?" My gaze turned icy. "Did he send you here?" Her expression stiffened for a moment, but then she regained her flirtatious demeanor. "I'm just concerned about you. What's so great about Willow? She can't do anything except work. Now her company is—" "Shut up," I interrupted coldly, my voice dripping with contempt. "Is that what you're here for? To sow discord? I'm not interested." "Wait." She became anxious, pulling out a manila envelope from her bag and handing it to me. "Take a look at this first." I took it and opened it. Sure enough, it was a stack of photos, intimate pictures of me with her, even some taken in bed. My expression darkened instantly. "What's the meaning of this?" "Makoto told me to give these to Willow." Her voice finally trembled with tension. "But I think we can work together. As long as you agree to one thing." I sneered. Did he threaten you? She instinctively tightened her fingers. He has leverage over me. If Willow sees these photos, it's over for you both. So, you want to blackmail me with these photos? I took a step closer, lowering my voice. Maria, you don't know me, and you certainly don't know Willow. I pulled out my phone and dialed Willow's number. Dear, you can come in now. 1 minute later, the door opened, and Willow walked in. Maria's face went pale, and she took several steps back. You knew all along. Willow didn't even glance at her. She walked to my side, a smile in her eyes. The photos are pretty good, but the angle's off. I laughed and pulled her waist close. I think so too. Maria stood frozen in place. Disbelief etched all over her face. You don't mind these? What should I mind? Willow raised an eyebrow. My husband's past? Or Makoto's petty tricks? I tossed the stack of photos back at her. Go back and tell Makoto, if he's got the guts, he should come here himself. Stop hiding behind women and playing these cheap tricks. Her face flushed bright red. Eventually, she broke down crying. You have no idea. He'll ruin me. I owe him so much money. Willow and I exchanged a glance. I sighed and pulled a business card from my wallet, handing it to her. This is my father's contact information. He's the deputy chief prosecutor. If you cooperate and testify, he can help you out. Her hands were trembling, but there was a spark of hope in her eyes. Is this for real? Of course it's real. Willow's tone was serious. But the condition is, you need to step forward and tell everything you know about Makoto. Maria clutched the business card tightly and nodded. By the time we left the hotel, night had fallen. The neon lights reflected on the wet pavement, the shadows dancing. Willow and I walked side by side, not calling for a cab. The streetlights stretched our shadows long. You really don't mind those photos? I asked, testing her. She glanced at me. I do mind, but not because of you. I was caught off guard. I mind because someone thinks they can destroy our relationship with such lowly tactics. She said it calmly. I couldn't help but laugh, squeezing her hand. You know, sometimes I really wonder if you're human. A normal person would get jealous. She softly replied, Of course I would be jealous. I froze for a moment and turned to look at her. But more than being jealous, I trust who you are now. My heart skipped a beat, and I stopped walking, facing her under a street lamp. Willow, no matter what happens, we'll face it together. Okay? Promise me. She gazed at me, her eyes filled with determination. Then she gently nodded. I promise. I held her hand tightly, and we continued walking towards home. Our shadows intertwined on the ground like a silent vow. The storm could come again at any moment, but in that moment, I knew I wouldn't face it alone anymore, because we had already become one. Chapter 9. The lights at the summit were blinding. I stood backstage, peering through the gap in the curtain at the sea of heads in the audience. Over 500 business tycoons, government officials, and media reporters were seated neatly. Among them were many of Makoto's allies, or rather, his protectors. I walked up behind Willow and gently squeezed her shoulder. Nervous. She shook her head, but I still noticed her unconsciously adjusting her already perfect collar. Today, she wore a deep blue suit, sharp, restrained, with her hair styled in a high bun and her makeup cool and precise. She looked like a sword drawn from its scabbard, ready to strike. I leaned closer to her ear, lowering my voice. Just got word from my dad. The police have set up. They're just waiting for your signal. She nodded, taking a deep breath. I knew she was also holding back the rapid beating of her heart. Over the past 3 months, we'd been working almost day and night, investigating, collecting evidence, consulting with lawyers, taking each step one by one. And now, she was about to step onto the stage and, under the world's gaze, pull Makoto down from his pedestal. 5 minutes, a staff member reminded us. Suddenly, I grabbed her hand and turned her toward me. She looked at me in surprise, but I held her gaze, speaking each word clearly. Remember, no matter what happens, I'm down there. Her eyes trembled slightly, and she reached up to touch the scar above my right eyebrow, a mark I got when stealing Makoto's incriminating evidence. Her touch was gentle, as though she were trying to stop the bleeding. I know, she whispered, then stood on tiptoe and placed a soft kiss on my lips. On the other side of the stage, the host's voice rang out, firm, commanding. Next, we have Willow Liu, founder of New Tech Innovations and former CEO of Liu Group, who will give us a speech on business ethics and technological innovation. The applause thundered. She gave me one last look, her eyes determined, before turning and walking onto the stage. I stood backstage, watching her figure as she stepped into the spotlight. As soon as she appeared, the entire room fell silent. In the front row, Makoto sat in the center, his suit crisp, his smile that of an old-fashioned gentleman. But I knew he was like a wary wolf, quietly hiding his sharp teeth behind that smile. Good afternoon, everyone. Willow's voice came through the microphone, clear and resolute. Today, I'm not just talking about business innovation. I'm telling a story about greed, betrayal, and redemption. She clicked the remote, and the first slide appeared behind her. Business ethics and legal boundaries. I saw Makoto's smile falter. For the next 20 minutes, Willow acted as an unflinching judge, calmly narrating the evidence displayed on the screen. Documents, bank records, audio clips, each one revealing the full chain of Makoto's crimes. Stock price manipulation, falsifying financial reports, money laundering, bribery, and bankruptcy manipulation. She even played a recording of Martin, the man who had once been Makoto's enforcer, his complete confession recorded after being interrogated by the police. I had listened to that voice 100 times, and every time, it made my blood boil. The audience was in an uproar. Some gasped, others cursed, and some secretly filmed. Makoto's face turned from red to white, and finally to an ashen shade. He tried to stand and leave, only to find the exit quietly blocked by several plainclothes police officers. Finally, Willow's voice suddenly wavered. I want to speak about a mystery that has been unsolved for 25 years. The screen displayed a scan of a yellowed file, one I knew all too well. It was the very one my father had handed me last night. In 1998, my father, Pablo Liu, was severely injured in a surprise attack. The suspect was his former business partner, Makoto. She paused before continuing. The only eyewitness was my mother, Sandra. But just before she was set to testify, she suddenly passed away, the official cause of death being late-stage stomach cancer. A murmur swept through the crowd. You're slandering me, defaming me. The old fox could no longer hold his composure, leaping to his feet and raising his voice above the microphone's amplification. At that moment, someone slowly stood up from the audience. It was an elderly man, leaning on a cane, but his voice was still booming. I can testify. What Miss Liu says is true. My heart skipped a beat. That was Professor Wu, the forensic pathologist who had performed Liu's mother's autopsy. Professor Wu stepped forward, his white hair stark against the crowd, but his voice rang out with strength. In Mrs. Sandra's stomach samples, we found an unusually high level of arsenic compounds. At the time, under pressure, the report was altered to say she died of natural causes, but I kept the original records. A deathly silence fell over the room. I saw Makoto's face go from pale to ashen, his eyes wild like a rabid dog glaring at Willow with clenched teeth. She gently steadied herself at the podium, and I could tell she was holding back her emotions. I nearly rushed to her side, standing next to her to block that malicious gaze, gently resting my hand on her back to comfort her. You've done it. The applause erupted from the audience, rolling out in waves. I could feel that it was not just for her courage but for the relief that the truth had finally come to light. As soon as the summit ended, the media descended like a tidal wave. I practically half-hugged, half-guarded Willow and ushered her into the car my father had arranged. The moment the door slammed shut, she collapsed against me. I held her as she trembled, barely able to speak. I gently patted her back, whispering, "It's over. It's all over." But she shook her head. "No, This is just the beginning. There's still a whole network behind Makoto. So what? I squeezed her hand. They'll be too busy trying to protect themselves to come after you. And you have me. And my dad. No one will dare touch you. She lifted her head, her gaze conflicted. In her eyes, I saw not just affirmation, but also a sense of dependence, something I had never imagined before. The woman who had always protected me now trusted me with her back. Thank you, she said sincerely. I smiled, shaking my head. No need to thank me. We're married. No need for thanks. We returned to our new home, one we had bought with part of the first round of funding. It wasn't extravagant, but it was safe, comfortable, and had enough space for a fresh start. My father was already waiting in the living room. When he saw us, he actually stood up and said, "Well done." Just those words nearly broke me. After more than 20 years, it was the first time he had directly acknowledged me. "Professor Wu, was he the one you found?" Willow asked. "Yes." My father nodded, looking at her before turning his gaze back to me. "I found discrepancies in the autopsy report, and it took some effort to convince him to come forward." He paused, his tone suddenly lowering, more somber than I had ever heard it. This case also made me realize some justice arrives too late, just like my debt to your mother. For a moment I was frozen. I had waited for these words for so long, but I didn't know how to respond. "Dad?" My throat was thick with emotion, making my voice sound hoarse. He waved his hand, that familiar stern expression still on his face, but there was a softness to it now. "Once Makoto's case is settled, I will reopen the investigation into your mother's disappearance. No matter the outcome, we, as father and son, owe her an explanation." I nodded forcefully, afraid I would break down and cry. Willow quietly took my hand. Her grip wasn't strong, but it anchored me like an anchor, pulling me out of the storm of memories. That night, we broke tradition and opened a bottle of champagne. My father even had a small glass, and the tension that had long held his face seemed to ease. After sending him off, Willow and I settled on the balcony, staring at the city lights in a quiet daze. When Professor Wu stepped forward, she said softly, I felt like my mom could finally rest in peace. I wrapped my arms around her, placing a gentle kiss on her head. My dad too. It's the first time in 25 years that he mentioned my mom. She leaned against my shoulder, her voice soft. We're really lucky. At our darkest moments, we found each other. I didn't respond right away, just holding her closer and saying, I'm the lucky one. If it weren't for you, I might still be that lost, useless person. Willow lifted her head to look at me. In the moonlight, I could feel the intensity of her gaze. Her fingers brushed over my brow, smoothing away a wrinkle I hadn't even realized was there. She spoke softly. No, you've always been you. It's just now you've found a reason to fight for. I held her hand and kissed it gently, whispering, I have many reasons, but you are the most important one. Time flew by. A year later, New Tech Innovations, the company we had built from the ground up, successfully listed on the Nasdaq. Its market value had already doubled that of the former Lu Group. The listing celebration was held at the most luxurious hotel in the city, filled with guests, fine wine, and clinking glasses. I wore a well-tailored deep blue suit, circulating among the familiar faces and new power players. And she, Willow, was stunning in a wine-red gown, confidently and gracefully standing under the spotlight, engaging with the guests. She was like the core source of light at this grand event, and I couldn't tear my eyes away from her. Now, let's welcome the CEO of New Tech Innovations, Ms. Willow Liu, to give a speech. The host's voice broke my thoughts. She stepped onto the stage, the spotlight shining on her like a halo. I raised my glass, and she saw me, smiling back. In that moment, I felt like she was the only one in the room worth watching. Thank you all for being here today, she began, her voice clear and steady, like a sword cutting through the air. The success of New Tech Innovations would not be possible without the effort of our team and your support. But today, I'd like to give special thanks to one person. I froze. My husband, George. Her voice resonated across the room. In that instant, I was taken aback, my heart pounding faster. She continued, "At my darkest moments, he taught me that business success is not everything in life. When I was on the brink of giving up, it was him who risked his life to protect the company's most valuable asset. And when I was consumed by thoughts of vengeance, it was him who reminded me to look forward." I hadn't expected her to say something like that in such a public setting. The hall fell silent. Many turned to look at me with approving eyes. Some even wiped away tears. And me, my chest burned hot, my breathing unsteady. So she continued with a calm smile. "I'm announcing today that New Tech Innovations will establish a charitable foundation dedicated to supporting startups that have suffered from corporate fraud. And this foundation," she paused briefly, "will be managed entirely by George." When the applause broke out, it felt almost unreal. For the first time, I felt I had truly found my place. Not just as Willow's husband, but as part of the stage, part of New Tech itself. Back home, I was still dazed from the rush of emotion. Slumped on the sofa, I muttered, "You realize how much work that fund's going to take, right?" She slipped off her heels and walked toward me barefoot, looking like a fairy stepping out of a childhood play. "Are you scared?" I swept her into my arms and spun her around in the living room. "Scared? Don't joke. I'm thrilled. Finally, I get to prove I'm not just the CEO's accessory." She playfully smacked my shoulder. "Careful. Your ribs just healed." I gently set her down, but I couldn't bring myself to let go. "Willow, have I ever told you I love you?" "You have," she said, scrunching her nose. "On average, 3 times a day. That's over 1,000 times a year." "Well, one more won't hurt." I looked straight into her eyes, my voice rough but steady. "I love you, Willow. Not because you're a CEO, not because you can run a company, but because you're you." Her eyes shimmered, and her voice came out soft and slightly shaky. "I love you too, George. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I was at my worst." I leaned down and kissed her. It was a long kiss, quiet, intense, and full of warmth. By the time we pulled away, the sky outside had already brightened. Morning light spilled through the curtains, coating our quiet living room in a soft glow. "Oh," she said suddenly, as if remembering something. "My dad's old apartment is being demolished next week. Do you want to go see it?" "Of course," I said. "I've never seen where you grew up." "It's just a regular teacher's dorm," she smiled. "My old room still has the pop star stickers I put up in middle school." I held her close, the two of us curled up on the sofa, planning our weekend, discussing the company's next steps, sharing the occasional soft kiss. From the slums to the stock exchange, from her emerging from vengeance to me waking from self-pity, we had reclaimed ourselves and our future in the most honest way possible. Who says bankruptcy is the end? For us, it was only the beginning.